Today in Luther's Kitchen, we're making gingerbread men. To begin with, we are creaming together softened, unsalted butter and some brown sugar, and we want to let that roll for about 5 minutes until it's light, white, and fluffy. Next, we are going to combine our dry ingredients in a medium-sized bowl. So we're using all-purpose flour, ground cloves, ground ginger, some nutmeg, cinnamon, baking soda, and kosher salt. And you want to just get in there and whisk all of those dry ingredients together. Now we are going to drop an egg into the butter sugar mixture, and we just want to get that mixed until the egg disappears. And ideally you want to use room temperature eggs, because if you have a cold egg and you're putting it with room temperature butter, then you're going to see chunks form because the cold of the egg is going to chill the butter. Now I'm adding molasses. Molasses makes this the gingerbread that you think of. It's going to give this dough a deep color, and it's also going to give it that smoky flavor. Once your molasses is incorporated, it's really important that you scrape down the sides of the bowl before adding in your vanilla extract and dry ingredients. So now we're going to start to drop in half of the dry ingredients, and we just want to stir this together so that the flour doesn't fly out everywhere. We also want to be careful not to over mix. So after you've added half of the ingredients, scrape down the side of the bowl, add the second half in, mix just until the flour disappears, scrape down the side of the bowl, and your dough is ready to dump out. We have to let this dough chill before we can roll it out and cut our gingerbread men. So I'm just using a single sheet of parchment paper, and I'm going to put the dough on the paper, make sort of a flattened disc, use the paper to wrap the dough in, and chill it for at least 3 hours or overnight. Now that the dough is chilled, it's time to roll it out. This is a good time to preheat the oven to 350 degrees and also to prepare 2 baking sheet pans with parchment paper. If you notice your dough is sticking to the rolling pin, a good idea is to put another piece of parchment paper on top, and then I use that as a guide so that I can try to get the dough to fill the space of the paper. I want to make it super thin. These do rise a little bit in the oven, so I'm trying to make sure that the dough is level and roughly about the size of the baking sheet paper. We're now ready to cut out our shapes, and depending on the size gingerbread men cookie cutter you're using, you could get a dozen or you could get more. The trick is to try to align your cutters so that you're not ending up with a lot of dough scrap that you have to re-roll out. It just makes the process longer and the dough becomes very sticky at that point. When you have all your shapes cut out, you want to transfer them to a parchment paper lined baking sheet pan and pop them in the oven. These take about 8 to 10 minutes to bake depending on how thick your dough is. You'll know they're ready when they're not glossy on top anymore but have a matte finish. For this recipe of royal icing, we are going to beat together pasteurized egg whites. They sell them in a carton where the eggs are located at the grocery store, confectioner's sugar, and vanilla extract. And we just want to beat that until the mixture is nice and smooth and glossy and is not super runny but is not super thick, because we're going to try to pipe our design on the outline of our gingerbread men. I'm using a small piping bag, but you could use a quart-size zip top bag, and it's really important that you roll the top of the bag down even if you're using a zip top bag. And I'm not using a tip for this because I don't have a really narrow tip, so I'm just going to carefully cut the bottom of the bag. So gather all of that icing, and you want to fold it down, try to release any air pockets that are there, and then cut tiny bit, because you can always continue cutting, but if you cut too much, you've ruined that bag. And then I'm just outlining the gingerbread men with kind of that classic shape. You can see that the consistency of the icing is perfect. It's not running down the side, so that means it's not too loose, and it's also not super thick that it's stuck in the bag. I'm gonna make a couple eyes, a nose. I tried a mouth earlier, but it didn't look very good. You can also fill in all of the cookie with the icing and then maybe put some sprinkles on top. That would be really cute. So again, I always start with outlining because that allows you to keep the icing on top of the cookie instead of having it slide all the way down. For this recipe and more, please visit myclasscancook.com.